It is astounding that PETA, which claims to champion animal welfare, would demonize us solely because of a rat test that we did not wish to perform, that U.S. food safety regulators requested, and that we performed in consultation with PETA management itself. Hey guys, so last month PETA wrote this blog post called Why It's Impossible for PETA to Get Behind the Impossible Burger, and it's pretty bad, it's pretty ridiculous. And my problem with it is, it's honestly not so much that PETA is against the Impossible Burger, that they won't support it. It's more the way in which they go about it, like the way that they present the company, Impossible Foods, which is like rather vindictively, and also the fact that they just leave out certain information, really pertinent information. So just quickly, for those who don't know about the Impossible Burger or what kind of sets it apart from other veggie burgers, its secret ingredient is soy-like hemoglobin. So it's heme from soy. So other veggie burgers and all veggie products have non-heme iron. And traditionally you would get heme iron from animal products, from red meat, chicken, egg, fish. So this is important in the case of the Impossible Burger because one of the things that kind of makes meat in terms of the taste, it kind of gives it its meaty taste, is heme. It's one of the reasons why veggie burgers, even the ones that taste good, they don't taste like a burger, right? You're never going to be confused like, oh wow, this really tastes like a burger. No, like even a really tasty lentil burger, it does not taste like meat. I think the one that comes closest would be the Beyond Burger, the pea-based burger. But even still, I don't think anyone would taste that and go, oh yeah, that's real meat. It's just like, oh yeah, that's kind of close, but no. And unfortunately, a lot of people want actual meat, right? They want something that tastes 100% like meat. So if we were going to reach those people, so if we were going to reach meat eaters and get them to eat less animals, we really need to come up with products that taste as close to meat as possible. And this is obviously what Impossible Foods are trying to do with the Impossible Burger. So now on to PETA and the blog post. So the big problem for PETA and many vegans when it comes to the Impossible Burger is that the production of this burger has involved animal testing. This is something I mentioned in the video that I did before on the Impossible Burger. And so if you read PETA's post, they make it sound like Impossible Foods just wanted to perform this test, that there was no reason for it whatsoever. They just voluntarily, chose to do it. Impossible Foods, the maker of the Impossible Burger, decided voluntarily to test one of its burger ingredients, soy-like hemoglobin, by feeding it to a total of 188 rats in 3 separate tests, killing them and cutting them up, none of which it has ever been required to do in order to market its products. But according to Impossible Foods, who has responded to this blog post in like 2 separate, like an unofficial response and then their response on Medium. According to them, they had a reason for performing this study. They didn't want to perform the study, but unfortunately they wanted a generally recognized as safe notification from the FDA. And they tried to get this notification without the trial, but the FDA was like, no, this is part of the process. You have to perform a rat toxicology study. So why would Impossible Foods want this sort of approval, this notification from the FDA? Because look, they can still sell the product in the US without getting this kind of no questions letter. The problem is, while they can sell it, many chains will not sell it in their stores, in their restaurants, and many countries will not sell it without this generally recognized as safe status. So in order to reach a wider audience, in order to get the Impossible Burger in as many restaurants, in as many stores, in as many countries as possible, they performed the rat feeding trial. Beth Mole for Ars Technica brings up another point, that the FDA does require that companies conduct such testing and be able to prove that their additives are safe after the fact. The FDA can step in at any time after an additive is put on the market and safety questions arise. With its rising profile and high-stakes investors, Impossible Foods did voluntarily seek out the FDA's opinion on whether like hemoglobin met the qualifications for a generally recognized as safe designation based on the company's internal safety data. But it would have needed to win over the FDA regardless if there were ever any questions raised about the burger. So while PETA is right that Impossible Foods did conduct a rat study in which 188 rats were killed, and that Impossible Foods did this voluntarily, they did not legally have to do this, I think there is more context, important context, that PETA should have included. And I think it's very telling that they did not include that information. I think this is information that people who, I don't know, get their vegan news from PETA don't do that. But if you do, like, this may be information that you might want to know. I mean, let's say I didn't know about any of this and I'm just getting my information from PETA. And so I believe them that Impossible Foods just tested on rats for no reason. I mean, that seems odd. I think I'd be skeptical. But let's say I believe them. Like, I would not want to support Impossible Foods either. I would not buy their product. But if I then learned that there's more to the story and that Impossible Foods tried to avoid this, but they ended up doing it, you know, to reach a wider audience, I would feel very differently, and I would feel pretty pissed off at PETA for misleading me. I'm not saying that everyone will agree with me. I'm sure there are still plenty of vegans who will not buy the Impossible Burger regardless, and that's fine. But it's so important that we have all of the information so that we can make an informed decision. Okay, so there are a couple of other points that are worth noting before I get into like the dumbest part of this whole post. So PETA says that Impossible Foods ignored advice from PETA, from a PETA scientist. The scientist said that there was no reason to test on rats, and yet Impossible Foods did it anyway. Impossible Foods says just straight up that this is a lie. They say that they actually consulted with PETA along with other organizations on how to conduct the study in the most ethical way possible. We used PETA's CRO checklist for guidance in requesting the most humane handling, housing, and testing practices available. PETA also says that Impossible Foods founder Patrick Brown actually arranged for additional testing for 2 more tests, presumably more feeding trials, they don't say. Again, Impossible Foods says that this is just a lie, that they have only ever conducted 1 test and have no plans to conduct any more. So I think PETA seems, earlier on they say that there were 3 tests involving 188 rats. Impossible Foods is saying there was 1 test involving 188 rats. They don't dispute the 188 number. So again, I don't know where PETA is getting this from, that there were 3. I guess, I don't know. However, Impossible Foods does say this. They say that if we are forced to make a choice between avoiding animal testing altogether and conducting a laboratory test that will help save the lives of millions more wild and domestic animals, we will do what is best for animal welfare and the world. So that doesn't sound great, but I think what they're saying without saying it, they're leaving themselves open to do further testing on additional products. I don't see why they would have to do another feeding trial or any other sort of trial for the Impossible Burger. They already have their no questions letter. So I'm thinking that this is for any additional products that they may sell in the future, whether they have something in mind or not. I don't know. So something like soy, like hemoglobin, but, different, obviously, that they would need a generally recognized as safe kind of status in order to sell with certain stores, certain restaurants in certain countries, right? So like maybe plant heme, but from a different plant, something other than soy, right? Presumably they would have to conduct another feeding trial for that heme or for that ingredient. Okay, so now we get to, again, just the dumbest part of this blog post. I'll get into why it's dumb in a minute, but first let's just go through what they say and kind of the claims. So under more bad news, they talk about the potential health risks of the Impossible Burger. Impossible Foods' big claim to fame is that there's heme in its burgers. Well, here's a shocker. This heme comes from soy like hemoglobin and contains more iron than that found in the heme of a similar serving of red meat. Having too much iron in your blood can mean a greater risk of developing cancer, especially for men and postmenopausal women. There's no need to consume heme since the body makes its own to be used in hemoglobin, which helps transport oxygen into red blood cells. They also talk about fat and saturated fat. They imply that the burger is too high in fat. They say that it's over 50%, and they say that most of it is saturated. Finally, they say the Impossible Burger is probably the unhealthiest veggie burger on the market. First, it is true that we don't need to consume heme iron in order to meet our iron needs. We can get enough iron from plants in the form of non-heme iron. It is also true that heme iron consumption has been linked to cancer, certain cancers. I talked about this again in the last video that I did on the Impossible Burger. However, Impossible Foods are probably right that this evidence isn't actually very credible, as recent reviews have pointed out. Impossible Foods also says that PETA is like just saying or implying that we don't need iron generally. Like, we don't need to consume any iron. And I think that's a stretch. I think it's pretty clear that PETA is talking about specifically heme iron. And it is true that you don't want to consume too much iron, and that this is more of a concern for men who don't need as much iron and postmenopausal women who aren't having periods, who again would not need as much iron. There's a reason that there is an upper limit set for iron, like even iron from supplements, which is not heme. Maybe people at risk for iron deficiency anemia could like eat an Impossible Burger instead of taking a multi or eating actual meat, which kind of seems to be what Impossible Foods is implying. But at only 3 milligrams per burger, even one a day probably wouldn't be enough to prevent deficiency. And one a day is already a lot if you can even find that or afford it. Impossible Foods also kind of fucks up again when they counter PETA's claim that the burger is over 50% fat. Impossible Foods says, no, it's not, it's 17% fat. But if you look at the calories, which is probably what matters. If you look at the calories per burger and the calories of fat, so you would multiply the grams times 9, it absolutely is over 50% fat. And they don't even mention the saturated fat because, yeah, it's got a lot. So yeah, PETA gets some stuff right, that yeah, you don't need, heme iron. It's not really a selling point of the burger, I don't think, in terms of like health or like fighting off iron deficiency or anything like that. But they're also probably wrong about the heme cancer connection, although I've made that connection before, lots of people have, so that's fair. And then obviously implying that like fat in itself is bad, not just saturated fat, that's kind of bullshit. But here's the part that gets me. PETA does not care. They do not actually care whether or not the Impossible Burger is healthy. How do I know this? Because they have promoted tons of unhealthy vegan products. They do this all the time, including vegan products that are super high in fat and super high in saturated fat. They've promoted Ben & Jerry's ice cream, which has lots of saturated fat from the coconut oil. They've promoted the Coconut Bliss products. I love Coconut Bliss. Ooh, it's good. Oh my God, they promoted their bars. One of those bars has 17 grams of saturated fat. Not to mention lots of sugar, which has also been correlated with cancer, just saying, and like no nutritional value whatsoever. Even funnier is that the specific product that they promote in the Impossible Foods blog post, the product that they promote as an alternative to the Impossible Burger, is the Beyond Burger. And while the Beyond Burger is lower in saturated fat, it's actually higher in total fat, which again, they imply is a bad thing. So it's pretty obvious that the only reason PETA is bringing any of this up, the heme iron, the saturated fat, the total fat, is because they've already deemed Impossible Foods as bad and the Impossible Burger as bad, right? So they're just seemingly just looking for more negative things to say about it, which is just really pathetic. Impossible Foods is trying to make a burger that people actually want to eat, a burger that actually tastes like a meat burger, right? Just like Ben & Jerry's are trying to make non-dairy ice cream that tastes like real ice cream, and Coconut Bliss is trying to make ice cream that tastes like real ice cream that people actually want to eat. You don't do this by making healthy alternatives, right? Like avocado ice cream, which is good, but it does not taste like ice cream, or, like a lentil burger, again, can be very, very good, but it does not taste like a burger. You do this by being innovative and by making food super delicious, and super delicious food usually not the healthiest. Again, PETA knows this. PETA wants more delicious plant foods, no matter how much sugar is in it, no matter how much coconut oil. They don't care about heme iron. They don't care about saturated fat in the Impossible Burger or any other plant-based burger. So all of that said, that's all of the stuff in the blog post by PETA. But I do want to say, if you still are uncomfortable with the Impossible Burger, if you still feel like what they did was wrong by, again, conducting this rat study, I really encourage you to read this article by the Good Food Institute. Unfortunately, every new food ingredient for which a company receives a no questions letter will have gone through animal tests. There are no exceptions of which we're aware. So the list of new food ingredients that have already been tested on animals and that pretty much everyone consumes is long and includes canola protein isolate, rice protein, pea protein concentrate, oat protein, and hundreds of other ingredients that are common in plant-based foods. Additionally, many color additives and food additives that have gone through the generally recognized as safe process are also tested on animals. So that Beyond Burger that PETA loves so much, well, its main ingredient was once tested on animals. The same with Ripple Milk. It also has pea protein. The same with, I don't even know how many rice protein-based like protein powders there are. So are none of these products vegan? Basically, even for someone who consumes an exclusively plant-based diet, it is almost impossible to avoid ingredients that have been tested on animals. So to wrap this up, yes, it is terrible that hundreds of rats were killed for essentially no reason. It's ridiculous that the FDA required this trial for soy-like hemoglobin. But I understand why Impossible Foods did it, and honestly, if I were in their position, I probably would have conducted the study too. I think it's also important to keep all of this in context. The Impossible Burger is not really for me. It's not really for vegans. It's for meat eaters. Obviously, it's for everyone. You know, I know there are plenty of vegans, even long-term vegans, who still miss meat and would love to have something that tastes like a real burger. But the point is, if you don't get that, you're vegan, right? Like you're just going to eat plant-based stuff and go, man, I wish I had a burger. Whereas most meat eaters will not. They will just keep eating meat until there is something that is equivalent and that they can find. Then they'll be convinced, right? Then they may actually change their habits.
A fast food burger chain served that in a restaurant and it was more readily available.
Okay.
I would eat it.
Yes, there you go.
But right now, you can't go out.
It's hard.
You can't walk down the street and just buy that.
Yeah,
So,
I would do it.
If the system changes, I'll change.
No, we have to demand the shit. I don't know. You know what? I'll think about it more. It's good to know this. For right now, burgers are my favorite food, guys.
Yeah, guys, I really like burgers. Don't make me feel bad about it.
My point is that, like, so what if vegans are kind of boycotting Impossible Foods, you know, going along with PETA? Like, so what? That's not their target audience anyway. And again, I have a feeling that a lot of vegans are not super stoked about a burger that bleeds in the first place. And honestly, it would not surprise me in the least if certain like meat eaters reading about this, that like PETA doesn't like the Impossible Burger, just makes them want to try the burger even more. Or maybe if they didn't at all, like now they want to try it just like out of spite, because no one likes PETA. Anyway, that's it. I think this is very unfortunate. I found the part where Impossible Foods says that there are people in the organization who are sympathetic to Impossible Foods. They know where they're coming from and they agree with their stance, essentially is what they kind of imply. And then there are these other, you know, PETA operatives, that's not right, you know, volunteers or people in charge, whatever, who feel differently. And they're the ones who kind of won. And now this blog post has been published. I don't know if that's true or not. I find it interesting because I've heard the same from other vegans who are not big fans of PETA. They have kind of suggested the same, that like there's this kind of two sides to PETA. You know, again, I don't know if there's two sides, but an organization that's that large, any organization, any charity, of course you're going to have different voices and kind of people butting heads and different opinions. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if there are people who are still part of PETA who are just like, God damn, really? Like this is such shit. We should be supporting this product, you know, or at the very least, just don't say anything. You know, we don't have to promote it. We don't have to write about it or anything, but just don't talk about it. And it could have been something really interesting. Like it's such a great opportunity to obviously talk about the issue of the feeding study and talk about ultimately the issue of the fucking FDA, you know, and how ridiculous this is. I mean, just the fact that you can release a product and sell it, but look out, like they could still come after you at any point, you know, it's really shit. And yet then you look at the supplement industry, which of course like isn't regulated. Oh God, whatever. It's a mess. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Of course, leave your comments and questions below. I would love to hear from those of you who have tried the burger, what you think. You know, I've heard from a lot of vegans, especially long-term vegans, it's been like, oh yeah, that's definitely the most meat-like, not really for me, you know. And then from meat eaters, I've read some that were like, oh my God, that tastes 100% like meat. I think more I've read that it's again, like really, really close, but not quite. I think there was with the hot wings guy, he and Anthony Fantano tried it.
It tastes like a dry aged high-end burger to me.
Oh,
like
man.
A medium rare burger, pretty much exactly. Yeah. You can't fool Sean Evans. But in this one, I'm an idiot. I'm blindfolded. I can't tell the difference at all.
I would love to see like a blind taste test of someone trying the Impossible Burger and a regular burger and with the same toppings and everything, right? And seeing if they could tell the difference. That would be cool. Maybe that's been done.
Was number 1 beef or was number 1 fake beef? 1, 2, 3.
Fake beef.
It was fake beef, yeah. Sorry.
And then was number 2?
I think it was the real beef.
Okay, yeah. Well, so much for... We spent $50 on those blindfolds.
Anyway, thanks again, guys. New video soon.